Christmas is the most wonderful time of the year. It is the day we celebrate God coming down in human form for all to see, for all to know our God of love. We know the Christmas story, don't we? Yes, we know how righteous Joseph was before and after the angel coming to him. We know how faithful Mary was to be a willing participant, to be Jesus's mother. We know about Mary and Joseph's donkey ride from Nazareth to Bethlehem. Had to be an incredible 3-day trip or so on a donkey in her, 8 or 9 month condition. We know there was no room in the inn, and baby Jesus would be born in a barn. We know that his first bed was a manger, a feeding trough, very appropriate for the one who would feed the world with his flesh and blood. We know the shepherds worshiped the shepherd King of Kings, wrapped in those swaddling cloths they would understand, because they too would wrap perfect newborn lambs in swaddling cloth, preparing them for a sacrifice for sin. We know the story of the wise men coming from the east, being led by that bright shining star, bringing gifts to the newborn king. And we know Jesus also became a refugee as his family had to flee for their lives to Egypt. Yes, we know the most blessed Christmas story, don't we? For those who do not know the story or cannot understand why God would come down to live as one of us, I put on YouTube earlier this week a modern day parable entitled The Parable of the Birds. I've used this parable often on Christmas Eve, which gives a wonderful explanation of why God came down to the world. Please share that video. It is a wonderful story. As wonderful as this time of year is, for a pastor who has been preaching the good news on Christmas Eve for the 19th time, what do I say that hasn't already been said or heard so many times? So I'm going to share a couple different views of the importance of this blessed Christmas story. And I want to start in that stable, that barn where Jesus was born. I've only been in barns a couple times in my life, and they were always out in the country somewhere. What I remember the most was having fun playing King of the Mountain on those huge bales of straw, and having straw all over the floor, which was kind of soft to walk on. It's wonderful seeing all the many animals, the horses, mules, cows, pigs, and then their feeding bags and feeding troughs. And there was always a very distinctive aroma. Nowadays, I would imagine many barns are spick and span, probably with some type of concrete floor and hoses to wash away all the aroma. Let's think about Mary and Joseph, what they must have witnessed on that first most holy night. Darkness, except maybe for a dimly lighted lamp. A dirt floor, noisy animals, no running water. Can you imagine the aroma in that barn? And it seems, at least at first, they were there all alone for Mary to give birth to God. I imagine that was the atmosphere when Jesus was born. Not a palace with all the comforts of lights, warmth, beds, oils, perfumes, plenty of food, and skilled people to provide a safe childbirth. Quite to the contrary, Jesus was born in one of the filthiest places possible. if we take a good hard look at our world, isn't it sometimes, and maybe more than sometimes, filled with darkness, loneliness, filled with people looking for a place to lay their head because there is no room in any inn? People filled with fears of hunger and COVID-19 and way too many prejudices. Yes, our world is filled with way too many people living in darkness, living in loneliness and the filthiness of the overwhelming stench of our sin. That, my friends, is the world that Christ chose. Jesus chose to be born in. Why? Yes, to identify with us, but more so, to let all marginalized, not good enough people, and all means all, to let us all know how much we are always loved by God. Remember what God said about creation, especially after God created humankind? It was very good. I believe God said that because we were created in God's image of love. When Jesus was born, when God became flesh and blood, I believe God was saying again, in spite of all the darkness and filthiness of our apple-eating sin, in God's eyes, we are still very good and loved. As miraculous as Jesus' birth was, as wonderful and atoning his death and resurrection was, my next different focus on this most holy night is to take a quick moment to focus on what Jesus did throughout his life to demonstrate and give the world God's gift of love. As we know, Jesus began in loneliness and in filth. He then lived as a refugee. Jesus lived in a dysfunctional family who did not understand him, at times even Mother Mary. Jesus was marginalized by a prejudice-filled world and treated as an outcast, at times by everyone. In spite of how filthy our flesh treated him, Jesus still treated our flesh as his beloved children. Jesus always fed, always healed, welcomed, accepted, and forgave all people, helping the world know we are always seen as very good in God's eyes. We could not have this incredible gift without Jesus' miraculous birth at this most wonderful time of the year. We could not have this incredible gift without Jesus' atoning life, death, resurrection, and ascension. And most importantly, we could not have this incredible gift without God's love for you, for all people, for all God's very good people. That is the God of love for the world from before creation. God's love that came down on that first most holy night. Jesus' love that lived a perfect life to gift the world with God's love and forgiveness. This is God's gracious gift. We are to shout, "Go, tell it on the mountain." What if, instead of celebrating Christmas once a year, we strive to share God's gift by following Jesus' example, to let the light from that bright shining Christmas star shine through us for the world to always see, to always know God's love. In the midst of all we have been through this year, this still is the most wonderful time of the year? What if every day was the most wonderful time of the year? Merry Christmas. Amen.